The gavel crashed against the wood, its thunder echoing like a gunshot, shaking glasses of water until ripples quivered at the edges. A juror jerked, their hand clamping the chair's armrest as though holding on for survival. Across the gallery, a reporter's pen froze mid-stroke, ink dotting the page like a wound that would never heal. In the silence that followed, a trembling voice spilled out from the witness stand, sharp as a knife. "I saw it all, and I can't stay quiet anymore." The words clung to the air, heavy with a charge that made every chest tighten. The prosecutor's lips curled into a smile too sharp for comfort, eyes glinting with something predatory. In the front row, a coffee cup fell, shattering on the polished floor, dark liquid spreading like blood in the light. Gasps rippled through the room, rising like a storm breaking against stone walls. The judge's face, carved from granite, betrayed no mercy, only the weight of decisions that would end or save lives. In that instant, the trial ceased to be a contest of law and became a battlefield where reputations, freedom and souls were already bleeding. The silence after the gavel faded into a suffocating hum, pressing down on every chest in the courtroom. The protagonist, Daniel Mercer, once a celebrated author, now sat shackled by whispers and suspicion. His name, once spoken with admiration, now dripped with venom. He clenched his jaw, sweat tracing down his temple as the prosecutor's voice sliced the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "today you will see not just a man on trial, but a legacy built on lies." Daniel's breath hitched, his eyes fixed on the jurors, searching for humanity in their stone expressions. Memories flashed, signing books, shaking hands, laughter of fans, now twisted into ghosts mocking him from the past. His lawyer whispered, "Stay calm," but calm felt impossible. The weight of betrayal pressed against his ribs, every sound magnified, every glance sharpened. He wasn't just fighting for innocence. He was fighting to reclaim the fragments of a life the prosecutor had already set ablaze. Daniel's pulse thundered as the prosecutor strutted across the room like a predator circling prey. Each word he spoke dripped venom, designed not to prove truth but to ignite hatred. "Fame blinds us," he declared, pacing before the jury, "but behind the golden curtain lies a man consumed by greed and deceit." Daniel's chest tightened, his breath shallow, as faces in the gallery leaned forward, eyes hungry for scandal. The memory of applause echoed bitterly, replaced by whispers sharp as blades. His lawyer scribbled frantic notes, lips pressed thin, while Daniel clenched the edge of the table, knuckles pale. The prosecutor's smile widened with every word, feeding on the silence that followed his accusation. Daniel wanted to scream, to rise and defend himself, but his body remained anchored, chained by fear and the weight of public judgment already turned against him. The judge's gavel tapped lightly, a warning for restraint, but its echo only deepened the suffocating tension. Daniel lowered his gaze, his reflection in the polished table staring back at him like a stranger. "Do you deny these claims?" his lawyer whispered urgently. Daniel swallowed, throat dry, words trembling before they could form. The gallery leaned closer, a sea of watchful eyes, every breath a demand for confession. A juror's pen scratched notes, slow and deliberate, as though carving his guilt into permanence. Daniel lifted his head, eyes burning, and whispered to himself, "They don't know me, they don't know the truth." The sound barely carried, but it was enough for the prosecutor to smirk, satisfied with the tremor of desperation. The trial had only just begun, yet already it felt as if the scales were tipped, the weight of the world pressing only on one side. Every eye in the courtroom fixed on Daniel, as if waiting for him to shatter. He straightened his back, forcing a strength he didn't feel, heart hammering against ribs like a caged animal. The prosecutor's words rang again, echoing in his head, a legacy built on lies. He wanted to fight, to rip apart the accusations, but his tongue felt heavy, chained by fear of making the wrong move. His lawyer leaned closer, voice low, "Patience, let the storm pass." Daniel clenched his fists beneath the table, nails digging crescents into his palms, as the jury scribbled more notes, their expressions unreadable masks. The silence was more dangerous than noise, a battlefield where every heartbeat betrayed him. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, but he refused to bow. If they wanted his ruin, they would have to drag it from him piece by piece. The first witness stepped forward, a middle-aged man whose voice cracked with hesitation, his words shifting like sand beneath his feet. I remembered differently now, he stammered, eyes darting to the prosecutor. The jurors leaned forward, their pens scratching eagerly, sensing the contradiction forming. Daniel's pulse quickened as the testimony bent against him, truth reshaped into something poisonous. His lawyer whispered, "We'll counter this," though his voice lacked conviction. Daniel clenched his jaw, rage burning, knowing lies were tightening the noose. The prosecutor tilted his head, feigning innocence, though his smile betrayed satisfaction. Whispers stirred in the gallery, a wave of distrust rolling through the air. The judge raised his brows, unimpressed, yet allowed the testimony to continue the stage, becoming more trap than court. Daniel whispered to himself, "Every word they twist kills me slowly." The defense attorney rose, his voice sharp, slicing across the witness' stumbling words. "You said last week you were certain," he declared, pacing with measured steps. The witness faltered, throat tightening, sweat gathering at his brow. Daniel's eyes locked on him, silently pleading for truth, though hope was dim. The prosecutor smirked, already preparing to object, his confidence unshaken. The jurors exchanged uneasy glances, their pens momentarily still. In the back, the reporter's pen danced furiously, scribbling contradictions, feeding the story that the world craved. Daniel gripped the edge of the table, his nails digging into wood, every sound magnified as though the room itself was breathing with tension. His lawyer leaned closer, muttering, "We can push him, but tread carefully." Daniel swallowed hard, watching the fragile fabric of truth fray before his eyes. The prosecutor sprang to his feet, voice booming with authority. "Objection, Your Honor!" His words struck like a hammer, and the judge's gaze cut sharply to the defense. Daniel flinched as the gavel tapped once, a reminder of the thin line they walked. "Overruled," the judge said, though the warning in his tone was clear. The prosecutor leaned back, lips curling, while the defense attorney pressed forward, trying to steady the unraveling thread. "So which is it?" he demanded of the witness. "Were you certain, or are you inventing new truths now?" Gasps stirred in the gallery, the air electric with accusation. The witness stuttered, his shoulders caving as contradictions stacked like stones against Daniel's fragile case. Daniel closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "They're burying me alive." The gallery buzzed with whispers, like bees swarming, as the witness testimony collapsed under pressure. I don't remember," he admitted, voice barely audible, yet sharp enough to wound. The defense attorney paused, letting silence crush the lie. Daniel's chest rose with shallow breaths, hope flickering though fragile as glass. The prosecutor's jaw tightened, his pen tapping on the desk in irritation, the smile gone now, replaced by calculation. The jurors shifted, uncertainty clouding their faces, and for the first time, Daniel saw doubt creeping in their eyes. His lawyer leaned back, murmuring, "We cracked him," though Daniel knew victories here were always temporary. The judge leaned forward, tone heavy. "The jury will decide what weight to give these words." The room's tension thickened like smoke, choking Daniel's lungs. Daniel's relief was fleeting, for the prosecutor rose again, voice smooth as silk, wrapping lies in charm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, facing the jury with outstretched hands, "uncertainty is the mask of guilt." The words slithered, burrowing deep into the jurors' minds. Daniel's stomach knotted, fury clawing at his chest. His lawyer slammed a note onto the table, whispering, "He twists everything." The gallery hummed with agreement, their faces reflecting the poison they were fed. Daniel bit his lip until it bled, determined not to break, though every glance felt like a dagger. The judge watched in silence, his expression unreadable, though his gavel hovered as though ready to strike again. Daniel whispered under his breath, "They don't see me, they only see what he paints." The courtroom's air thickened as the second witness stepped forward, a young woman whose eyes betrayed unease. She raised her hand, swearing the oath, yet her voice trembled. "I saw him that night," she said, pointing toward Daniel, though hesitation cracked her tone. Daniel's chest tightened, his throat dry as the prosecutor's gaze sharpened like a blade. "Clear enough," the prosecutor purred, feeding the jury exactly what he needed. But the woman's words faltered, her lips trembling as memory betrayed certainty. The defense attorney rose quickly, voice stern. "Did you see, or are you guessing?" Her hands shook, fingers twisting nervously, the jury watching every twitch. Daniel's breath grew shallow, each word of testimony like a dagger carving away at his hope. In the gallery, whispers slithered, and Daniel whispered to himself, "They want me broken." The prosecutor circled the witness like a hawk, voice dripping with false reassurance. "You're certain, aren't you?" he asked, each word a trap cloaked in comfort. The witness shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between Daniel and the jury. Daniel clenched his fists under the table, fury boiling as lies cemented themselves. His lawyer whispered sharply, "Don't react, stay still." The jurors leaned forward, pens raised like weapons, eager to capture her hesitation. Daniel's heartbeat pounded so loudly it drowned out the murmurs of the gallery. The prosecutor's smile widened, savoring the silence before pressing again. "Tell them what you know." The witness' lips quivered, her answer stumbling as though dragged against her will. Daniel whispered, almost inaudible, "This isn't truth, it's theater." The defense attorney rose sharply, breaking the spell. "Objection. Leading," he barked, his tone snapping across the room. The judge's gavel struck once, eyes narrowing as silence fell. "Sustained," he said firmly, his voice cold authority. Daniel exhaled, a flicker of relief crossing his face, though his chest still ached with tension. The prosecutor forced a smile, masking irritation with practiced charm. The witness wiped sweat from her palms onto her skirt, shrinking in her seat. The defense attorney turned, fixing her with a steady gaze. "Tell this jury exactly what you saw without help." Her voice cracked. "I don't remember every detail." Murmurs rose in the gallery, spreading like fire. Daniel closed his eyes, whispering inwardly, "She's breaking, but will it save me?" The witness's voice cracked again. It was dark. "I only thought. Maybe it was him." Gasps rippled, the gallery erupting in whispers. Daniel's lawyer leaned forward, seizing the moment. "So you admit you're not sure?" The prosecutor slammed his hand onto the desk, objecting furiously, but the damage was done. Daniel's heart raced, relief sparking like fire in his veins. A juror scribbled notes with renewed intensity, their brow furrowed in doubt. The prosecutor glared at the witness, his composure slipping for the first time. Daniel felt hope claw its way back, fragile but alive. He whispered to himself, "They heard it. They finally heard it." The judge banged the gavel for order, but the noise of scandal had already spread. Daniel sat straighter, his eyes flickering with fragile defiance as the witness' uncertainty hung in the air. The prosecutor leaned back in his chair, lips pressed tight, fury hidden beneath a mask of calm. His pen tapped rhythmically, each strike a reminder he was far from defeated. Daniel's lawyer whispered, "We found the crack, but stay patient." The jury's faces remained unreadable, yet their silence was no longer stone, it was shifting sand. Daniel clenched his fists, whispering inwardly, "They will see me." For the first time the weight pressing against him felt lighter, though the storm had not passed. The gallery's whispers lingered, buzzing like vultures circling above, ready to feast on the next mistake. The judge's voice cut through, "Proceed." The courtroom trembled with a sudden shift as the next piece of evidence was introduced. A folded letter, edges yellowed, handwriting jagged with urgency. Daniel's lawyer laid it on the table, his hand shaking just enough for the jury to notice. The prosecutor's smile flickered, eyes narrowing as he recognized the name signed at the bottom. Gasps erupted in the gallery, the sound rising like a storm surge. Daniel leaned forward, his pulse hammering, as his lawyer whispered, "This could change everything." The judge adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable, but the weight in his stare demanded silence. The prosecutor muttered under his breath, jaw tightening. That wasn't supposed to surface. Daniel's heart seized as the jury leaned in, every eye burning with hunger for the truth now laid bare. Prosecutor rose swiftly, his voice sharp. Your Honor, this is inadmissible. His words cracked through the air, but his panic was visible beneath the veneer. Daniel's lawyer countered, voice steady. It is directly tied to motive. The judge leaned forward, gavel in hand, tension radiating. Daniel's chest tightened, his breath shallow, as the jury's pens froze midair. The prosecutor's mask slipped further, his lips pressed tight, sweat beading along his hairline. This is manipulation, he spat, though the tremor in his tone betrayed him. Daniel whispered under his breath, he's afraid. The gallery buzzed, the sound of chaos waiting to spill over. The judge's gavel slammed once, silencing the storm, his voice booming, proceed. Daniel's heart thudded as the ground shifted beneath everyone. The letter was read aloud, each word slicing deeper than the last. I can't hide it anymore. The voice of Daniel's lawyer carried. Our affair will ruin us both. Gasps tore through the gallery, the jurors shifting violently in their seats. Daniel's hands went cold, his heart crashing into his ribs, the words blurring into noise. He turned toward the witness stand, his eyes locking onto the woman who had accused him. Her head bowed, her lips trembling, tears spilling down her cheeks. The prosecutor buried his face in his hands, fury and dread warring behind his eyes. Daniel whispered, She lied about everything. The gallery erupted into whispers, sharp as daggers, the room unraveling as betrayal scorched every corner. Daniel's lawyer pressed forward, voice ringing. This proves collusion, deception, and motive to frame my client. The jury stared at the witness, their pens abandoned, their silence heavier than any verdict. The prosecutor leapt to his feet, fury contorting his face. This is slander. His words cracked with desperation. Daniel sat frozen, his breath ragged, caught between relief and devastation. The judge's gavel struck repeatedly, his voice thunderous. Order! Order! But the chaos refused to die, the gallery's voices rising in waves. The witness sobbed, her shoulders quaking, her entire body betraying the weight of her exposed secret. Daniel whispered to himself, the truth is breaking through, but at what cost? The air was thick, charged, a battlefield ready to ignite. The room fell into a silence that felt endless, broken only by the shallow sobs of the witness. Daniel straightened, his face pale yet sharpened with the fire of vindication. The prosecutor sat stiff, eyes narrowed, hands trembling against his notes. The judge leaned forward, his voice calm but heavy. This court will recess to review the evidence. The gavel struck once, echoing like a gunshot across the fractured room. Daniel's lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering, We've cracked them wide open. Daniel nodded faintly, though his eyes were locked on the witness, her tears burning into him as proof of betrayal. The gallery was a sea of faces frozen in awe and disbelief. Daniel whispered to himself, The war has just begun. The courtroom returned from recess heavy with anticipation. The jury's eyes sharpened, the gallery hushed as though holding a collective breath. Daniel sat rigid, his lawyer whispering, This is where we press. The prosecutor stood, face carved into steel, his voice ringing, a single letter cannot erase a mountain of lies. He paced, each step striking like a drumbeat, his eyes fixed on the jurors, as if daring them to doubt him. Daniel's fists tightened, nails biting into his palms, his heart echoing louder than the prosecutor's words. The defense attorney rose in defiance, his voice sharp. This is not about lies. It's about manipulation of truth. The judge's gavel hovered, his eyes cold, letting the clash roar. Daniel whispered inwardly, The storm has broken. I either drown or fight to breathe. The defense attorney stormed forward, voice rising, You twist words into daggers, but truth resists corruption. The jurors flinched, the words sharp as glass. Daniel leaned forward, his body trembling with suppressed rage, his eyes burning holes into the prosecutor. The prosecutor smirked, hands clasped behind his back, projecting control though sweat beaded on his brow. The gallery murmured, the weight of battle drawing them tighter into its grip. Daniel whispered, "Say it louder, let them see me." The defense attorney slammed his palm onto the desk, papers fluttering upward like startled birds, his voice booming. "This is not justice, it's theater designed to destroy." The judge's voice snapped, "Control yourselves," but the gavel stayed still, as though he wanted the storm to rage. The defense attorney unveiled a folder, photographs clipped together, each one a blade aimed at the prosecution. "These are the payments, the connections, the secrets hidden," he declared, thrusting them before the jury. Gasps echoed as the images passed into hands, the jurors' eyes widening with every page. Daniel's breath caught, his pulse surging, as hope lit his chest. The prosecutor lunged forward, his voice breaking. Forgery, fabrication, but doubt stained his tone. The gallery roared, whispers rising like wildfire spreading across dry fields. Daniel's lawyer pressed harder. "The truth doesn't crumble under light, it survives." Daniel whispered to himself, "Please, let them believe." For the first time, the prosecutor's mask slipped completely, his face twisted with panic. The judge banged his gavel, his voice thunderous. "Order!" But the courtroom was ablaze with energy that refused to die. The prosecutor shouted over the noise, "This is deception," but his voice cracked with desperation. The defense attorney turned sharply, eyes blazing. "If exposing corruption is deception, then your truth is poison." Daniel rose halfway from his seat, his lawyer's hand pulling him back down. His eyes locked on the jurors, silently begging them to see him, not as a villain, but as a man stripped of everything but hope. A juror leaned back, pen abandoned, face unreadable but no longer stone. Daniel whispered under his breath, "They're listening now. They have to be." The air itself seemed alive, electric, ready to snap. As silence returned, the judge's voice carried finality. "We move to closing arguments." The words sliced through the storm, pulling the room back into fragile order. Daniel sank into his chair, heart pounding like a war drum, his fists aching from clenching too tightly. The prosecutor straightened, his expression smooth but his eyes betrayed cracks of fear. The defense attorney placed a firm hand on Daniel's shoulder, whispering, "This is our moment, we make them see." The jury's eyes remained fixed, not stone anymore but restless, shifting unsure. Daniel closed his eyes, whispering inwardly, "Please, let them hear me, let them know me." The gavel struck once, sealing the act, the weight of destiny pressing harder than ever. The courtroom braced for the final storm as the prosecutor stepped forward, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, eyes burning, "this man built a life on deceit, and today you decide if justice ends it." Each word rang like iron striking stone, echoing across the hushed room. Daniel sat rigid, his jaw tight, his hands trembling beneath the table. He forced himself to meet the jurors' eyes, but their faces remained cold, unreadable masks. The prosecutor circled, his hands slicing the air with practiced ease, every gesture sharpened for impact. The gallery leaned forward, drawn like moths to the flame of his conviction. Daniel whispered, "He wants me buried alive." The gavel remained still, the judge allowing the speech to burn unchecked. The prosecutor leaned closer to the jurors, his tone swelling, "If fame shields guilt, then justice dies here." He slammed his fist against the lectern, the sound jolting the gallery. Murmurs rippled like thunder rolling over a dark horizon. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears, his breath uneven as he felt the words coil around him like chains. His lawyer scribbled notes furiously, whispering, "He's overreaching. Let him drown in it." The prosecutor turned, eyes glinting, and pointed straight at Daniel. "Look at him, silent, unmoved. Innocent men do not sit in shadows." Daniel clenched his jaw, whispering to himself, "I'll speak when it matters." The judge's face remained carved from stone, but his grip on the gavel tightened, ready to restrain the fire. Daniel's lawyer rose, his voice steady but rising like a storm. "You've heard theater, not truth." He stepped closer to the jury, papers in hand, his eyes piercing. "Justice isn't born from shouting. It's born from evidence." He held up photographs, the letter, the cracks in testimony, laying each piece like weapons upon the battlefield. "This man has been painted a monster," he thundered, "but the monster is the manipulation standing against him." Daniel's chest swelled, his eyes wet with restrained fury, whispering, "Fight for me." The gallery leaned in, silence gripping tighter, breaths held as the words cut deep. The prosecutor sneered, but did not interrupt, his jaw tight, his confidence frayed. The gavel rested motionless, the judge watching with hawk-like intensity. Daniel's lawyer leaned closer, voice dropping, every word landing heavy. "You don't just decide guilt, you decide if truth matters." His words cut into the silence like chisels against stone. Daniel's hands unclenched for the first time, his chest rising with fragile hope. A juror's pen slipped from their hand, clattering softly, the sound like thunder in the silence. The prosecutor's mask cracked further, his eyes darting nervously toward the jury box. Daniel whispered under his breath, "Please, see me." The gallery sat frozen, faces pale, as if the weight of justice pressed on every chest. The judge leaned forward, his gavel resting but ready, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burning with the gravity of the moment. The silence cracked as the judge's voice rose, deep and final. "This court will now hear the verdict." Every sound died, the air electrified with dread. Daniel sat upright, his heart hammering, his breath shallow as the jurors filed out. His lawyer leaned close, whispering, "Whatever comes, you fought." Daniel's eyes locked on the floor, then lifted to the gallery where faces blurred into shadows. The prosecutor sat motionless, his expression strained, but his eyes still burned with the hunger of victory. Daniel whispered, "It ends here," his voice barely audible, yet carrying more weight than any argument. The gavel struck once, the sound echoing like a drumbeat of fate. The waiting began, a silence deeper than war. The jury filed back in, their faces shadowed with the weight of decision, silence pressing against the walls like an invisible storm. Daniel's heart pounded, each beat a countdown to his fate. His lawyer whispered, "Hold steady, whatever comes." The prosecutor leaned back, mask restored, his lips curled in a predator's calm. The judge's eyes narrowed, his gavel resting but heavy in his grip. "Madam Foreperson," he said, "has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a woman in her 50s, rose slowly, clutching the folded paper as though it carried the world's burden. Daniel's breath froze in his throat, his body rigid as stone. The gallery leaned forward in unison, 1,000 breaths drawn at once, waiting to hear the words that would either destroy him or set him free. The foreperson's voice shook as she unfolded the paper, her eyes flickering toward Daniel, then downward as though unable to meet his gaze. "We, the jury," she began, each syllable a hammer on his chest. Daniel's fingers dug into the wood of the defense table, his nails leaving faint marks. The prosecutor leaned forward, lips parted, savoring the moment before the blow. The judge's gaze bore into the jury box, unblinking, the gallery frozen in a collective trance. "Find the defendant." The words stretched in silence, Daniel's breath suspended, his heart slamming once more like thunder in a void. His lawyer whispered, "Breathe." But the word felt meaningless against the storm of silence. Daniel closed his eyes, whispering inwardly, "Please, let truth survive." The foreperson's voice cracked, "Not guilty on all counts." Gasps ripped through the gallery, the sound crashing like waves breaking against stone. Daniel's body shook, his breath erupting in a ragged gasp, tears welling unbidden in his eyes. His lawyer clasped his shoulder, whispering, "You're free." The prosecutor's face blanched, his jaw clenched, the predator stripped of his prey. The judge's gavel slammed down, his voice commanding, "Order in the court," but the chaos swelled beyond control. The witness buried her face in her hands, sobbing as the truth's weight crushed her lies. Daniel pressed his palms against the table, whispering, I survived. Yet even in victory, the shadows of scars lingered, for he knew freedom would never erase what had been taken. The gavel's pounding finally subdued the uproar. The judge's voice resonant. This court is adjourned. Daniel stood slowly, his legs trembling beneath him, his body heavy with the weight of survival. The gallery split like a sea, whispers chasing him, some filled with relief, others dripping with doubt. The prosecutor gathered his files with violent precision, refusing to meet Daniel's eyes, his aura reeking of defeat. The witness slipped away in tears, her footsteps vanishing into silence. Daniel's lawyer whispered, "They can't touch you anymore." Yet Daniel knew the truth. Freedom was not the same as peace. He walked out of the courtroom, each step echoing in hollow finality, his name cleared, but his soul scarred. Outside the courthouse, the air felt colder, the world unchanged yet irrevocably different. Daniel paused at the steps, cameras flashing, reporters shouting his name, voices clawing at him like vultures. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any word. His eyes lifted to the gray sky, heavy clouds drifting like unspoken questions. His lawyer whispered, "It's over," but Daniel knew it wasn't. Not truly. His freedom carried shadows, his future haunted by betrayal and loss. He whispered to himself, "The truth set me free, but it didn't save me." He walked forward, his figure swallowed by flashing lights and endless noise, leaving behind a trial that would never stop echoing in his soul.